In this video, we'll take a look at the steps of actually pushing out a NAC agent from the ISE server to the clients. Let's begin. In order to do provisioning of the network admission control agent out to our clients, we have to do a few things. Number one, we're going to identify a provisioning policy that identifies what types of systems should have agents running. We also need to provide some guidance regarding if we do have a client that is not running an agent, we need to go ahead and redirect them to some resource that can provide them that agent. In our environment, that's going to be the ISE server. So while we're waiting for that client to download and get the actual NAC agent from the ISE server, we can deploy downloadable access control lists, and we can also redirect traffic from this client on this port over to the ISE server. This redirection is very similar to what we did for CWA. This time, instead of specifying that we're doing the redirection for web authentication, we're going to do the redirection for posturing. We want to redirect the client to the posturing portal so they can go ahead and actually download the agent from the ISE server and then have it installed. And then as that client does download and install the agent, there's also a posture agent profile that instructs the agent on how to behave, including details such as if the agent is running, where should it report to? So as part of our posture agent profile, we can specify that ice.nuglab.com is our server that the agent should report to and check in with. In the demonstration of deploying our NAC agent, we're going to use port 0/7 and the device that's hanging off of that port, which is a Windows computer. Currently it has Network Access Manager running on it. The computer is a member of Active Directory, and so is the user. It's IT Bob. So to start off, I want to make sure that we have basic functionality, that the authentication works, and then we'll create the additional policies and profiles to implement the NAC agent provisioning to deploy and use a NAC agent on this computer. So here on ISE, under Operations and Authentications, it shows us that we currently have Bob that is currently logged in. That's IT Bob. And let's do this. Let's go ahead and bounce Bob and make him re-authenticate again. So under the COA action, we'll select Session Termination with Port Bounce just to verify that Bob really can, right now, successfully authenticate and get in using his existing supplicant. So that's a great starting point, making sure that Bob, before we add the deployment of an agent, has successful access to the network. Our first step is to create a posture agent profile. And to do that, we're going to go to Policy, and then go to Results. And then on the left, we're going to go to Client Provisioning, go to Resources. So our location is under Policy, Policy Elements, Results, Client Provisioning, Resources. This also happens to be the exact same location we'd go to download updated versions of the NAC agents. Except what we're going to do here is we're going to click on Add, and we are going to add from the drop-down an ISE Posture Agent Profile. And we're going to call this NUGLAB Agent Profile. Now there's lots of bells and whistles that we could tweak here. I'm going to just change one attribute, and that's the discovery host right here. I'm going to put in ice.nuglab.com. A network admission control agent that's currently using this profile will know who to reach out to and contact as a server for asking and reporting information it finds on a client. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and click on the all-important submit in the bottom left-hand corner here. So now we have all these software components from Cisco, plus we have our NUGLAB agent profile that we just created right there. The next thing that you and I get to do is to create a client provisioning policy. And to do that, we're going to go to Policy, and from the drop down, we can go to Client Provisioning, or because we're right here on the policy page anyway, we can just go ahead and click on Client Provisioning, and that would take us to the exact same location. And by default, there are no client provisioning rules in our client provisioning policy. So we're going to create one. And let's call this All Windows. In this rule called All Windows, let's go ahead and specify by clicking on the plus symbol in the Operating Systems column. let's choose the operating system of any version of Windows. Now we could expand that and we could indicate, specific versions of Windows are going to be required to have an agent running. Or if you and I want to require that anybody running Windows, regardless of version, needs to have an agent running, we could go ahead and use the back arrow here and just simply select Windows All. In our provisioning policy, we can also say that we only want this policy to apply if the user is a member of Active Directory. So regarding other conditions, we could click on Create New Condition. We can select the attribute of AD1, which represents our Active Directory. We can specify an external group. And then from here, we can select one of our Active Directory groups that we had brought over into ISE. Here in the results column, we can specify what we want that requirement to be. So regarding the agent, we'll go ahead and use the drop down and say we're going to require the NAC agent 4.9.4.3. You'll notice it didn't even give us the option for a Macintosh version of the agent, and that's because over here we're taking a look at Windows operating systems, not Mac. So let's use the NAC agent. Next, it's asking us about the posture agent profile that should be associated with that agent. Now, we only created one. It was called NugLab Agent Profile, so we'll select that. That's the one that pointed to ice.nuglab.com as a discovery server. So because our focus right now is on deploying the agent itself and not compliance with the policy, I'm going to go ahead and leave the compliance module as blank, meaning you don't have to be compliant with anything at the moment. And then we'll click on Done. And of course, remember the last step is to go to the very bottom and on the left-hand side, click on Save if we want this policy to be saved. Our next step is to create the authorization profile that identifies if a client is not running the NAC agent, so we can do redirection of that client to the portal on the ISE server where they can get the NAC agent. And to do that, we're going to go to Policy and Results and Authorization. So we're under Policy, Policy Elements, Results, and Authorization. And specifically, we're going to create a new authorization profile for that redirection. Now, if we wanted to, we could also create a specific downloadable ACL that we would use in conjunction with that authorization profile. And as a demonstration of that, let's create a simple access control list just for a reference point. So we'll go to downloadable ACLs, we'll click on Add, and we'll call it ACL during posture. And I'm going to put in a permit IP any. And in a lab environment, that's perfectly fine. Then once you verify that all the pieces are functioning, we can go back in and then start tightening down that access control list. So it truly will limit that port to what you want to be able to happen on that port while that client is getting its agent from the ISE server. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit, click on Submit, and let's create an authorization profile. We'll click on Add, and let's call this Posture Auth Profile. Now, if we did have a downloadable ACL that we created that we wanted to use with this authorization profile, we could select it from the drop down here. And the most important piece of this posture authorization profile is the redirection that we want to do to take the client's traffic and redirect it over where the client can get the agent from the ISE server. And to do that redirection, we're going to click on this checkbox right here, Web Redirection. And this time, instead of saying we want to do central web authentication from the drop-down, you and I will select Client Provisioning, and in parentheses, Posture. It's asking us about an access control list to identify which traffic should be redirected. Now this access control list has to exist on the switch. So if we go over to the switch and we do a Show Access Lists, and here on the switch, I have this redirect ACL. Now, we used this previously with CWA. That was the centralized web authentication. And if we wanted to, we could use this same redirect ACL again to redirect traffic for the benefit of CPP, which is referring to the provisioning of the NAC agent for the client. So I am going to copy and paste the name of that access control list on the switch. I'm going to put it right here, paste it, and if we scroll down, it has a little summary here of the attributes it's going to use. So there's the downloadable ACL it's going to use. There's the name of the access control list for redirection that's on the switch. And also regarding the redirect URL, notice here it says CPP. So we'll click on Submit. Now this authorization profile isn't really doing us a lot of good because it's not applied yet. To apply the authorization profile, we're going to go to Policy, and then from the drop-down we'll select Authorization, and here's our authorization policy with all the rules. So currently, the user on port 0/7 in his computer are being successfully authorized based on this entry. And what I'd like us to do is modify this authorization rule to add the requirement that the computer is also compliant in addition to its existing requirements. So to edit this, we could double click on it to edit it, or we can click on the edit button. We'll click on the conditions plus symbol, and we'll simply click on this bottom right gear and click on add attribute/value. For the attribute, we'll select session, and then beneath session, we'll select posture status. And we're looking for posture status equals compliant. Now you might be saying, Keith, that's a huge problem. We won't be compliant because we don't even have a NAC agent running on Bob's computer. Not yet, but we will. So I'm going to click on Done and then click on Save. So our user who matched this rule just a few moments ago won't match it now because he currently doesn't have an agent running. So he can't be identified as being compliant with anything without the agent running. So the second thing we want to do is to create an additional rule here in our authorization policy that's very similar to this rule here. So to cheat a little bit, we can go ahead and click on that down arrow and say duplicate below. That creates an identical rule based on the previous one. And I'm going to call this user with unknown PC regarding compliance, which implies that it doesn't have an agent running on it yet. And then for the conditions, I'm going to hit the plus symbol and change our very bottom option. Instead of saying compliant, I'm going to select unknown. And we'll click on Done and click on Save. Bob's computer, without the agent currently running, is not going to be found compliant. So it'll drop down to the next rule of unknown. And as a result, it's going to go ahead and apply this authorization. It's going to apply this authorization profile, which we need to change to the authorization profile we just created. So I'm going to click on Edit and change our authorization profile to the standard authorization profile we just created called Posture Authorization Profile. And that is the magic that's going to redirect Bob where he can get the Cisco NAC agent and install it on his local computer and then try again. So we'll save that and let's go back to Bob's computer. So here at Bob's computer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select Class Fast. And what that's going to do, that's going to send EAP messages and do the re-authentication at the switch. So let's go take a look at the switch and see what happened. If we do a show authentication for sessions, specifically interface gig 0/7, and let me bring this down a little bit so we can all see it together. I'd like you to notice a couple cool things that happened. First of all, it knows it's Bob. He's had success. However, take a look at the downloadable ACL. It's the ACL during posture ACL that's been applied logically to Bob's port. In this case, it's port 0/7. And the access list on the local switch being used for redirection is called redirect. So if Bob does send some web-based traffic through his port, it's going to be redirected to this URL right here. And you'll notice it's CPP at the end of it, which implies it's being used for posturing. So on Bob's computer, let's go ahead and open up a browser. And we'll go out to google.com, and that was the default website for his browser. And it's redirecting us over to the ISE server URL. And it says, hey, the Cisco agent's not installed. That's kind of a problem. That's why you're here. And it gives us the opportunity to go ahead and install the agent, which I'm going to do. We'll simply click on Next to continue all the way through it. It does require administrative rights on this local computer to install this software. We'll accept everything, say yes to everything, click on Next to everything, and it installs. And now it says the Cisco agent was successfully installed. My hands are not touching the keyboard or the mouse. I'm still going to wait a few moments for the NAC agent to start on Bob's computer. And here it is. Now, because I'm not requiring any specific policy to be enforced, I'm considered to be compliant. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. I'm going to go back to the switch. And back on the switch, if we do a show authentication sessions for interface gig 0/7, we have the access control list that's been downloaded as part of our authorization profile. And there was also a VLAN policy associated with that authorization profile. And there's no longer the redirect. So if we go back to the ISE server and go to operations and authentications, so here has the history of what just happened. So when we initially connected, we had the authorization profile associated with us due to having a posture status that was unknown. We didn't have an agent that was running. Then we installed the agent, and this time, because we were found compliant, because we aren't requiring any specific rules, but we do have a NAC agent running and reporting to the ISE server, it found us as compliant. It went ahead and chose the Our Authorization profile, which was associated with this downloadable ACL. It applied it to Bob's port, and now Bob has full network access once again. In this video, we've taken a look at the configuration steps on an ISE server to create the profiles and policies to provision and push out a network admission control agent for a client to install and use before giving them full access to the network. I have had a great time in this video. I'm so glad you joined me for it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.